Hey, y'all, and welcome to another edition of the Unscripted Huddle, brought to you by the National Football Alliance. The NFA's purpose is to honor, improve, and advance the sport of tackle football. If you're the parent, coach, or administrator of a youth or high school player, you're in the right place. We aim to deliver an authentic voice regarding performance, safety, and the medical truth to support you and your players. My name is John Reagan. With me is Joe Rafter. Let's kick it off.
Welcome, everybody, back to another edition of the Unscripted Huddle, hosted by and presented by the National Football Alliance. My name's Joe Rafter, Chairman and CEO of the National Football Alliance, and I am joined with my partner in crime, Mr. John Reagan, our Chief Football Officer. John, it's been a while. How's your summer going?
It has been. It's going great. I'll tell you what, that's the only way I'll ever get the initials CFO. I can promise you that. One look at my bank account and it'll be obvious. But, man, we are excited to be back at this. Very blessed to have Diron Tappin with us today, president of the Arizona Youth Football League, and has a great story to share with us, to share with our listeners. And so, Diron, welcome. Glad you could take some time for us.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
So we're going to jump right in so that we at least start on track. We don't usually stay on track, but we'll start on track. So we'll start on track with first down here. Tell us background. You were telling us a little bit off air, but tell us background of your story of getting involved in football and how you ended up kind of at least where you are in youth football at this point in time.
Yeah, I'll kind of keep it short, but it starts when I was a kid. My experience with youth football as well, and even before that. My dad was a youth football coach when he was just out of high school, and met a couple of his best friends by coaching their kids. And so that element of that, like, kind of lifelong camaraderie coming out of youth football was always around when I was a kid. So my dad, he didn't coach me, but he coached up until he had me, and coaching was always a big point. My uncle was a college baseball coach, so like coaching was kind of in my DNA. And when my son came along, I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to stay out of the coach's way and let them do their thing, just because, I didn't want to be that dad. And that was like the first and last practice I ever brought a chair to, and just, jumped in, started helping anywhere I could. And it kind of, went on from there. So, I jumped in, coaching, my son, his friends, and then, working with the organization, started doing, frankly, all the stuff that nobody wants to do, right? Organizing, registration and all the background work and stuff like that with my local team and our league. And then that kind of, parlayed into, working with, other teams in the area, working with our league in general here in Arizona, having more, do more of the administrative stuff than just coaching. So that we were, we had a prior organization that unfortunately went through a really tough time in 2023. The prior ownership, the owner took a medical leave and passed away in the middle of the season, in the course of about 10 days. And, myself and the other folks here were kind of thrust into action to pick up Arizona football, from where it was and, call it the fourth week of the season in the fall of 23 and make that happen. So my partners here in the league, JC Lunt, Shannon Easton, and I just kind of parlayed everybody that we knew together to get, put the pieces back together, put Arizona youth football back on track, and what is now Arizona Youth Football League.
Diron, going back to that very first practice that you went to, that you took your chair to,
yeah.
I did that after 28 years of coaching college football. I went to my son's youth practice and took my chair and decided I couldn't sit and watch, and I didn't take my chair and go onto the field. I took my chair and just started walking and working out during practice. What was it, as you were sitting there in the chair, that said, I got to get involved in this? Was it necessity? Was it desire? Was there something you were seeing that, hey, I need to be a part of this, or something you were seeing, this needs to change? What was it? What made you do that?
I would say it was a little bit of all those things. I think the first thing I saw was looking at the other coaches and realizing that they needed a hand, right? At this time, these are 6-7-year-old kids. It's like herding cats out there. Like I kind of felt like they could use all the help that they could get. So whether I was, started out like everybody, it was out of necessity, but you kind of felt compelled to get off your butt and go help. And that's really kind of what it started with. So whether I was, of course it starts by holding a pad, then you're running a drill, then you're bringing drills, and now you're writing practice plans. And next thing you know, you're, waist deep in coaching, and it's really the hard habit to kick. So I would just think you just felt like these guys need a hand. They could use a hand. Why not? I'm here. Just jump right in.
So John, like parents like Diron are gold in the youth football space. So Diron, I think our kind of our personas here, but I spent most of my time in youth and high school football. John's more the college guy and above, and finding parents who want to contribute and jump in and make a difference and pick things up. If it's no matter what it is, what do you need me to do? You need me to pick up applications. You need me to make copies of photos. You need me to like put together registration cards, rosters, whatever. You need me on the computer. Like those kinds of roles are completely invaluable to the youth environment because they are really, frankly, very thankless, right? Kind of like an offensive lineman, right? They're just like
that's very much so. I mean, any adult that's willing there and ready to put the needs of all of the kids ahead of their own kid or themselves, or see the bigger picture, which is football in general, right? The greatest team sport that there is. That they're willing to put all of their other stuff aside to make sure it's a great experience for everyone. I mean, that's like you said, you hold on to those people with both hands. And so like now where I am working with these head coaches and organization leaders, I know around the country people call them teams or clubs or whatever we call them, organizations. So our org's like helping those people have those tools to say things like that, like hang on to that parent, what can we do to make your coaches better? What can we do to make your life easier? So like now that I'm on the administration side rather than coaching, like that's the thing I think of is like when I was coaching, I didn't like doing this, or I didn't want to do that, or I wish the league did more of this. So that's what we do. We kind of look at it through the lens of coaches.
It's awesome. So John, can I move the second down?
You know what? You're going to get mad at me because I'm the
dude.
one
I got a sixth down coming up. I'm just letting you know.
I'm throwing a flag. It's a challenge flag because I need clarification because Diron said something that always hits home with me, and you know that. And he said the words, "the greatest team sport there is." And so I've got to ask you from your perspective, because certainly I feel that way. Joe feels that way. I hope many of our listeners do. A lot of our listeners are listening looking for information. And so help them with your interpretation of why it's the greatest team sport there is.
I mean, I think there's just that air of responsibility and brotherhood. And so, I mean, just talking about this through like the youth lens, what I would say to parents is that, for instance, if they have a new player, they're coming from another sport, let's say baseball, that player needs to understand their responsibility and other people's well-being is dependent on their actions. So I used to say, well, if the second baseman lets the ball go between his legs, the third baseman doesn't end up in a hospital, right?
Yes.
But if you're on the blind side of the quarterback and you don't know your assignment, somebody's going to get hurt. It happened actually. It was go back to thinking of it was a punter when I was coaching 10-year-olds at the time. Kid didn't know what he was doing, didn't know the play, and somebody got a free run at a punter, right? And it was like hard to watch. It was like watching a train wreck. So like that responsibility that you're in charge of other people's well-being, I think is why it makes it a team sport. I think that you're not. It's one of those, you want to go fast, go alone, you want to go far, go together, all of these things that, that come into like the coaching terms. I think that, it's really, it's all 11. There are no, unimportant jobs in any play or position or otherwise.
Joe, I honestly feel like that was a successful challenge. I retained my challenge flag, and I can still
later.
use it. So I'll let
keep
you
your
go on to
timeout.
second down.
You keep your timeout.
I'll let you go on to second down.
John, you're gonna have a hard time getting me to end this conversation because this is in my wheelhouse, this youth space.
It's like once you get coaches talking, it's so hard to stop.
It is. What I would add to what you were saying there, Diron, is not only can the child get injured, but the team suffers. The team loses.
Yeah.
Right? If Johnny doesn't do what Johnny's told to do, if he fails to execute for whatever reason, coach didn't teach him proper technique, Johnny didn't execute proper technique, Johnny had a mental mistake, Johnny's 10 years old and he saw a bird fly away and he thought, oh my gosh, I love birds. He got distracted. For whatever reason, the team suffers. And that isn't the case in every other sport. In every other sport, you got baseball, you got 9 guys on the field. You can be successful with 3 on any given defensive play.
Right.
Basketball, you got 5 guys on the court. You can be successful with 1 on any given offensive play. That's not true in football. It's not. Now, in youth football, there are a couple dynamics where if you got this, that, if you got 3 guys on offense, you might be able to have a pretty successful day if you use them appropriately. However, as a team sport, football is literally flawless in its design because your imperfections will get exposed by the opposition wherever they are on the field because it's 11 on 11 is how I feel about that. Just to add a little bit to your point of view there. Second down. Diron, a lot of the people who we talk about and we've interviewed so far and had on our show have been parents, coaches, players. I find your role is pretty unique in that I hold you to be more of an administrator. Mm-hmm. So for all and they're a part of our audience too. So for all the administrators out there, I'm going to go into that a little bit. What do you think are the keys to administering and operating a highly successful and excellent youth football program? What are the things that keep you awake at night or the things you're always focused on being excellent at?
And it's always, my answer is always going to be through the lens of a coach, right? Which is, I joke with coach. Every coach says the same thing to me. And John, you probably even heard this in the college ranks is, I just want to coach. They don't want to do X, Y, and Z. I just want to coach. And I tell people, I've been looking for that.
Darren, let me just jump in and say that's why I'm not coaching anymore in college football because I wanted to coach, and that's the least of what you do, right?
I've been looking for that job for about 15 years now. Haven't found it yet. Right. I coached youth. I spent 5 years coaching high school.
Sorry to interrupt.
It's just, it just doesn't exist, right? So I look at it through the lens of everybody's experience, right? Obviously, everyone thinks about the players, right? We're here for the players, but you want the parents to have a good experience. What does that mean for them? That's easy things like registration, sign-ups, finding a team, things like that. But then again, going back to the coaches and then the org leaders that we deal with, the organization leadership, chances are they're just a coach that's been around long enough. It's another battlefield promotion they probably got. Well, Joe's been here for 5 years, so he should be our org president, right? And it's not, nobody walks in day one and be like, hey, can I do all the paperwork, right? Nobody said that. So you're kind of thrust into it. So I always think of how do we make things easier for them? So whether it's, registration, scheduling, otherwise, how do we use as much technology as possible, but then also realize that it's still, things require context. So for instance, in our rulemaking, we, stole the idea from the NFL. We have a competition committee. There's, a dozen or so folks that are on that, 9 of which are voting members from all different parts of Arizona, of the state. There's men and women on there. There are coaches, there are administrators that are on there. And we never make any decision in a bubble. So it's okay, well, what are the local rules that we make that are right for us? Why are they right for us? Again, the easy one in Arizona, for instance, is the weather, right? Everyone else in the country wants to be done before the end of October. That's the best time of year for us to be playing football, right? So we start our season the Saturday after Labor Day. So things like that. So the thing that keeps me up at night is just like every coach, how could we do that a little bit better? It's that line of, it's a limitless subject matter that you're never gonna get to the end of the road and just be like, oh, that was the best youth football season ever. Done, right? No, you're going to try to do it again. You're going to try to make it better. You're going to try to expand it. And so that's kind of, it's the coaches, I would say. So the answer in general is just having that coach's mentality that we could always do it more efficiently. We could do it better.
So Diron, as you were talking there, what started to come to mind to me is a little bit of, there's some military analogies for me. I've never been in the military. I've had family in the military and I've studied the military. But a lot of what I've learned is that it's all about downrange. It's all about that soldier on the field. Mm-hmm. What do we need to do to equip that soldier on the field so that they can do their job the best? If I'm a cook, if I'm a supply chain person, doesn't matter. I got to make sure that I'm enabling that person downrange who's in front of the competition to do their job the best. And what I heard from you is analogous. I want to get the coaches the ability to do their job as best as possible, and I want to alleviate them from overhead paperwork, non-football content type stuff. Important stuff, incredibly valuable, and operationally important. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you the question, because in my experience, what I found is most people get into, and you said this in a different way, but what I found is a lot of people get into youth football because their kid plays and they love the sport, but not because they're operationally excellent, administratively solid, financially strong. They're just great, fundamental people, salt of the earth individuals who want to help their community create a great experience for the kids. And what happens is, I think sometimes the ability to craft that whole experience, it's not just about having the best coach on the field. There's so much more that goes into running a youth program that I think is part and parcel of a high school or a college program. It comes along with that institution, whether it's your public high school, your private high school, or your college. You get a lot from that institution. Whereas at the youth level, you kind of have to build all that yourself. You have to build your athletic director. You have to build your competition committee. You have to build your rules yourself. And so I think at the youth level, it's a bit of a heavier lift, which is why I wanted to ask you that question.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other moving parts. Like I tell people, simply things like scheduling. Well, scheduling pro or college is easy. Everyone's the same ability, and they own their own facilities. We rent high school fields, and everybody's a different age and a different ability, right? So we have to find ways to do that. And like one of the things we do is we have teams fill out like an intake form. Is your team new or they experienced, so on and so forth. And we use that to make the schedule. And then we dynamically build the schedule off of results so everybody has a good experience. Nobody wants to be on either side of a mercy rule, right? If you're a good team and you run 6 plays, you score 6 times, what did your team learn? Nothing, right? You're gone in a half an hour, right? So we want to make sure that it's a good experience for everybody. And that means that kid that you're watching on TV 10 years from now saying, oh, I saw him as a youth player, to the kid that never plays again after the season. So you want to make sure that everybody, and their parents, right, they can trust in what you're doing. And then, my seat is now giving the tools to those coaches and other administrators to be like, hey, we've got this covered. So one less thing for you to do. So you can focus on what you're doing. And so that's what's exciting about it now. And I don't coach anymore because this takes up so much of my time. But I feel like now I'm like coaching coaches, which is even more rewarding. And I tell them, like, we have our season kickoff
and maybe more important.
Yeah, I mean, we have our season kickoff meeting Sunday night. Arizona State's nice enough to host us in their facility. We're very lucky. We've got great partnerships. D. Grayer on our team runs with all of that stuff. And so we'll go into ASU. We're using the football team's, meeting space. We'll stream it to everybody that can't make it or lives too far away. And I'll tell them at that meeting, like, what do you need? Do you need, like, one of my old practice plans? Do you need a template? Do you need whatever? Like, we're here to help. So, like, make your life, easier. And then, from the football stuff and then the fun stuff around it, just to make it a great experience.
That's awesome. I love everything you're saying, man. I for the administrators in the community, it's tireless and thankless work. Because the coaches will be on the field, they'll call the plays, win or lose, they'll have to deal with it. But the back office, I think, is so vitally important. I learned from one of my football coaches a while ago, supply chains win wars. And so what you're doing is you're the supply chain to the youth football organization in the Phoenix area, right? In the state of Arizona. So, John, I got a flag now, a challenge rule I got to throw on my own second down.
Go for it.
So I got a question for you, Diron. It's a little more, I'm going to be a little bit provocative here.
Okay.
AYF. Why do you choose to play in AYF?
I think it's right on the front page of their rule book is that their number one thing is they don't want to get involved in your individual affairs. They understand the uniqueness to each organization around the country, and everyone's got their own the kind of way of doing things. But like, let's help you. Like, let's give you the tools to do things the way that they've been done elsewhere, and you can learn from other people's experience. They don't come in with a heavy hand and shove things down their throat. They're very, they're very open. So whether it's So, like again, locally, I mentioned Deke Grayer. He's the National Football Commissioner. We're lucky enough to have him in Phoenix. He's been around youth football twice as long as I have, and he's got the deep alumni network of everybody that's gone through it and does a lot of great things for us. So, like having that resource nearby, just the support we get from him or from Ben Jaffe out in the West or Craig Carahood in Nashville, like AYF just gives us a lot of good tools, but they don't beat us over the head with anything, which I think is it. And if we have something we think's right for Arizona, then we kind of let them know, hey, this is how we do things. And they're like, okay, well, that's not really applicable nationwide, but maybe there's another state or other reply that could use it properly.
Love that.
Yeah, Joe. I mean, it goes right into the conversations that you and I have had again offline, but that because of the unique nature of youth football and localities, nobody wants to be governed from afar and say this is how it has to be done. And again, we won't turn this into a political conversation, but it allows. It sounds like, at least in this case, it allows them in Arizona to do what they need to do where they need to in Arizona, to allow young people, boys and girls in Arizona, to play football and do it with the parameters and in the environment that they have, which is very different, because I'm not sure that people in New York would want to be playing, in upstate New York, would want to be playing football in early November and watching games, when in Arizona they may be just wanting to start their season at that point in time.
That's right. Yeah.
Youth football is hyper local.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like
it needs to be that way.
And
it needs to be that way.
Appropriately so. And so
right.
like I love what you said, Diron, about like there's a superstructure, there's an architecture that gives us tools and capabilities that kind of is helpful for me. And at the same time, I have the ability to the flexibility to do what I need to do locally. So, like, filing it away in the case of hyperlocal. So, I have another question for you, Diron, and second down still, John. So,
oh boy.
So, when the temperature reaches 104, how do you react to that in Phoenix?
Well, 104 is a walk in the park for us. We'll take 104 the whole season if we can get it. It's 111 today. So really what we do is we use the National Association of Athletic Trainers guideline, the wet bulb index that gives you how much work versus how much rest during the time of day. And then we always tell coaches, let's let common sense prevail. And we kind of do that with our officials as well. So we'll pick on last season. We had 115 degree, 120 degree weather September 28th last year. It was very unusual for us to be that hot that late. That's July-like temperatures, right? So we shifted our schedule to be more in the morning before it hit those temperatures. And then we empowered our coaches and our officials to say, and then we also have a site director that's an independent person that's there running each facility and checking in the teams and stuff like that. We kind of like gave them the tools of, if it gets too hot at your field, for instance, as part of kind of our response protocols, make the call. Like, you're the one that's kind of there, or we just find there's somebody who's been through the experience that's kind of better than us, smarter than us. Let's find that resource and implement it, is really what it came down to. And so the question was, well, what do our high schools do? Okay, well, they use the National Athletic Trainers Association. Great. Well, then give me that information.
Yep.
And then nowadays everybody's got. I mean, I do have the wet bulb meter I can go out to the fields with, but most people can read it off an app nowadays, right? So, so that heat's just one of them. But again, I mean, back to John's point, like, we want to start our season in September. So we usually start the Saturday after Labor Day, and then our championship is the Saturday before Thanksgiving. So like that's a good season for us, because that's that works. It doesn't. School generally starts the first week of August. That's when practices begin. Most teams practice in the evening, so the sun's down, stuff like that. And that's what's hyper local for us. And then, taking the page out of kind of the whole, like, we don't want to beat you over the head with rules. That's kind of the way that our rule, like, our supplemental rule book is, I believe it's 3 or 4 pages. It's not daunting. You don't, like, everyone usually carries around a copy. It's not too cumbersome. And then we have a section on our website, which is a living, breathing document of basically what the organizations are in charge of and what we're in charge of. So, sometimes people will say, for instance, team placement. So all of our teams are independent clubs. We're not dependent on, town, municipality, boundaries, anything like that. So we let parents know if they come to us that our teams are independent clubs. This is what you can expect from each of them. Here's a couple of them in our team directory that are close to you. Start there, but go out, go to practices, go to camps, meet the coaches, find out if it's what you're looking for. Because if the kid's just dipping a toe and we send them to the team that practices 4 times a week, maybe that's too much, or vice versa. There's a lot of personalities that are there. So that's one thing that we really encourages our club's independence as well.
Wait.
I'm going to jump in, Joe, here and take us. Oh
no, wait. So first, Diron, you're like a Wikipedia of best practices right now. Honestly, at the youth level, I love what you're saying. I asked you the question about the 104 degrees because in your area, there's a way of dealing with that because it's pretty much business as usual.
Right.
When I was coaching a youth program in San Francisco, 104 degrees was like,
shut it down. Yeah.
What? You're crazy that you're even thinking of practicing at 104 degrees, right? And quite frankly, for that area, that was appropriate, right?
Yeah.
And that's my point about being hyper local. So this, back to the AYF conversation, I think at the youth level, it's really hard to put these blanket requirements across everybody, everywhere, because the sport has variations as simple as the local temperature that you're practicing in, and giving that local organization the ability to flex a little bit. Just like be smart, make common sense. Don't cancel it. Just adjust, accordingly. I think the guidelines from another organization is 104 degrees. If it's 104 degrees, you got to shut practice off. I think I've seen that, if my memory serves me well. So I really appreciate you highlighting how you're responding under that temperature.
Yeah, not to turn it into a weather podcast, right? But it's in San Francisco, it's going to be humid. By us, it's extremely dry. So that's why they use that wet bulb temperature. Rather, it's like what is the actual feels like? Because it could be it could be 92 in the Bay Area, and that's as bad as it feels at 110 in Arizona. So my amateur analysis the feels like thing is a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the feel like temperature in San Marcos today at noon was 173 degrees.
What?
So, yeah, I'm kidding, obviously.
Is that when the news teaches you, like, you can make a lasagna in your mailbox, that kind of thing?
No doubt. Eggs on the sidewalk, all that kind of good stuff. So,
all right, third down.
I'm not going to give him a chance to throw a flag here, a third flag on the same play. And you've kind of led into it already, but if you were to talk about really two things in this, right? So take it as far into either one as you want to, but one, the state of the kind of where is youth football in Arizona right now? Obviously, we've heard, and going to say it bluntly, great things from Mike Pollock about what you're doing. And so also the state of youth football in the Arizona youth football and with what you're doing. So the state, what you're doing, and then why is what you're doing, my statement, not yours, so much better, or at least elevated from what is going on just in the state?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love the Arizona question. We're really proud to be in Arizona. Arizona is a very independent state. It's one of those places, like you said, not to turn political, right? But we have more registered independents than any other party in Arizona. So that gives you an idea of like what the Arizona kind of mindset is that people are pretty open minded, and it's a place that people have been coming to. The joke is it used to be a place people went to die. Now it's where people go to live, right? So like there are more younger folks, influxing Arizona. A lot of people think it's a retirement, kind of area, but you can't swing a dead cat in Arizona without hitting a former pro athlete. So if you just look at the names of some of the kids that are getting recruited out of Arizona, their last names, whether it's, McNabb or Fitzgerald or, so on and so, Urlacher, Raiola, et cetera, and I'm picking on kids that all happen to go to one school, but like there are tons of former pro athletes of all sports in Arizona, and their kids are shining. So like for me, the big picture is that 10, 15 years from now to be watching either like NFL draft pick, where did these kids come from? And we're never going to be Florida, Texas, or California, right? Those are just population-wise that we would never be able to catch up to it. But we could catch Ohio or Georgia or Mississippi when you had, I think, 9 guys drafted this year from Arizona in the first 3 rounds, things like that. So, like, that big picture, that's why I'm so excited to be on board with Arizona football and just simply give these coaches the tools to properly promote and develop these, kids that have these outstanding athletic pedigrees that we're lucky enough to have. And again, because of the weather, we're training year round, we're playing year round. We can, we do a spring and a fall season. Our spring season's about 75% the size of our traditional fall. So I think that's, that's one of the big advantages of being, in Arizona. And then why, so that's the big picture. I mean, Arizona football, Arizona sports is on the rise. I mean, you get 600, 700, 800 kids that are playing college football coming out of the state of Arizona. They're all over the country. That's always, that's fun to see and stuff like that. And just to have some sort of a hand in that, to watch all these young people develop, that's really exciting. You see our high schools will play nationally, and you'll say, oh, I don't remember when that kid was, 10 years old and stuff like that. You usually get, 2 or 3 of our high schools in the national rankings. We have a lot of pride in that. What we're doing as a league, and again, to the hyper-local thing, it's because it works for us. So you mentioned, Mike Pollock, and he's got a great relationship with teams in New Jersey, which again is also hyper-local, but the two towns may be pretty far apart, right? So the kids play for their town teams. They don't, they don't have open borders, if you will, like we do. That doesn't work for us. In Arizona, high schools are open enrollment. Where I grew up in Hawaii, you either went to public school or private school, that was it. But you couldn't go across town to another public school and play football. You absolutely can in Arizona. So that's the first thing. So the high schools are open enrollment. So why isn't youth open enrollment? That would always be the question, right? Why are we between this street and that road and so forth? That didn't work for Arizona. So that's something that we're not. And then people might think, well, it's like the Wild West with all these clubs and so forth. But like, why shouldn't you be able to find the situation, that makes your kid, your family happy and have a great experience? So like, it's kind of honoring that Arizona independence. So our teams are independent clubs. We do hear of kids driving across town from this team to the next, but maybe they want to play with their cousin, or they want to play for a certain coach, or whatever the case may be. Or, we celebrate that independence. So that's what it's right for Arizona. I also think it's recognizing that we don't have all the answers to all the questions, and we'll give it a shot. So whether it's a rules change or something like that, we're happy to tinker and be that experimental ground, for football. But I think we're doing a lot of things that was already natural, in Arizona, and whether it be, open enrollment or, the weather, the calendar, things like that. I think that's very specific to us.
John, any flags on the third down?
No, I can't throw any more flags.
Right.
We've thrown a lot of flags.
Keeping it in your pocket.
I think it's pretty interesting that, in a time where, and maybe it's post, but for so long, youth football was struggling, bluntly. That it's thriving and it's exciting that it's that way. And maybe it's that way other places as well. I'm not as in tune. But to hear that and to hear that optimism and that hope coming from Arizona is pretty exciting.
Well, I think that goes back to, again, I mean, meeting, Mike Pollock that introduced us is very, he's the linchpin or part of my story. I felt compelled back at getting out of that chair that I was not going to let football become MMA, right? I was going to watch football become a gladiator sport that you watch on TV, but you wouldn't let your own kids play. So what do I do to be part of a better, safer, yet still physical football? And that's why, Mike's going to be speaking at our coaches meeting. I beg every coach to take him. I'm lucky enough to have worked with him for many years. I love the quote that he stole from me and put on his website, which is, since we used tip of the spear, we had more state championships than concussions. That was my experience. That was absolutely true. We had 1 concussion and 2 titles in 2 years. So that was, and it wasn't an accident, right? It was a performance training that the byproduct is safety. So that's what's going to get football back. And I know what, John, you're saying. You're talking about kind of the peak concussion stuff. So rather than when we went from denial to what can we do to circumvent it, that's what changed sports and the attitudes towards youth sports. And so and it's not just simply, penalties, but it's also technique. What technique can we do that improves the product, that improves the outcome, but also takes the head out of the game? I think that was
technique for the players and education for the parents. And continually on both sides. Joe and I've talked about it, and you've heard us talk about it, lifelong learners, and might as well be, even if it's not lifelong football for parents and 6 or 7 or 8-year-old kids, might as well be learners and take the best information they can in to make decisions, as opposed to making the dramatic or emotional decision.
I'd also add, and Diron, I don't think you'd ever say this, but it also takes leadership at a league, at a state level, which you're providing. You're creating a container for others to participate in, right? Just like AYF's is creating a container for you to buy into. Each of your leagues. I was on your website earlier today. I don't know, you got like 100 associations, something like that.
Yeah,
right.
100 associations, be over 250 teams this fall.
So 100 associations are buying into what you're setting up. The architecture, the structure, that is uncommon across the country. There's something you're doing that is unique and special, and I think we're hearing a bit about it. Like, I know and by the way, there's several leagues in the country who are doing similar things, right? They're creating these larger organizations that people are able to buy into, and they the scheduling and the ground rules, the culture, a 3-page rule book indicates to me a very healthy culture and buy-in of people to operate under a certain set of parameters that don't have to be put into 55 pages of rule books. Right. And so that's happening in pockets around the country, and that's why it's one of the reasons why I think Mike recommended you, that we wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think you do have I think you're doing some really special things, and I think the Arizona youth football community is blessed to have you in the role that you're in.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying so. And I mean, again, back to the coach's mentality. I think of the Barry Switzer line of the great thing about football coaches: they'll kick your butt on Saturday and then tell you on Monday how they did it. Everything that we do it's an open book. It's on our website. Our rules are there. If you want to see our team intake form of how do we rank teams preseason, find out under the resources page of our website, I tell our coaches 95% of your questions can be answered there. So if you're running a league organization in another city, I mean, steal my book. It's right there. It's kind of out there. Our playbook is out there, and it's, call us anytime. Our phone number's there too. So
John, this is why I get excited about youth football, man. Like it
understandably so.
So such great fundamental individuals who are just trying to give other people the gift of the game and the kids the best possible experience that they can create, and you're doing a great job, Diron. I mean, I love hearing everything you're saying.
So if I follow up on that statement, Joe, and take us to 4th down, because we are there.
Yeah.
Talking about giving kids and their families, and anybody else that's involved, a great experience. If you had to, and you can certainly make the list longer than this, but if you had to pick 3 things that youth football is going to teach or coach or players are going to learn, so whether it's directly taught or it's implied learning, 3 things that need to be done, what would those 3 things be? This is a run-on sentence. And
I'm going to throw a flag on your 4th down question, John. This is the longest question in the history of our show.
So the best part of this is how we get 4th and 5th down here. All right, so get your pen out. Here we go. Yep. So top 3 things that youth programs should be teaching their players. And if there was a parent out there that came to you and said, hey, I am debating whether or not my 3 sons should play youth football, what would you tell them? Not yes or no. I'm not looking for that. I mean, that should be an individual decision. But what would you tell them that they need to know if they're trying to make that decision?
All right. So the top 3 things they're going to learn, One is going to be failure, right? I think that's one of the things that it's one of those games. It's those games that's going to allow you to fail. I mean, it's great, right? Not every it doesn't work out all the time. The best player drops the ball. The best, smartest player misses a blocker an assignment. So there's going to be a failure. There's those 11 individual battles that are going on. You're not going to win every one of them every play. So I think that's probably the best thing. We mentioned it off the air. The camaraderie of football players, it goes beyond their team. Right? How many times have you guys been in a social situation completely away from football and somebody hears that you're involved in football in any way, shape, or form, and they just tell you their football story right away? Oh, I played in youth, high school, college, etc. I love, what did you teach? What was your position? Right? Because every coach was a position coach at one point, right? And then kind of grow from there. There is a brotherhood of football players that's out there that you're now exposing them to, which actually I might end up stealing back into why my kids should play. So my number two
That's
bullet
okay.
point of your top three might be the answer to the other question.
That's okay.
So
you can bookmark it and come back to it. It's all good.
So I'd say that was it. And two, I think thirdly, I think it's also it's development, of the whole athlete. I stole this from the head coach I worked for, Conrad Hamilton, Desert Mountain High School, played in the NFL, well-known Arizona football coach. He used to say that every coach says in their interview that they're multi-sport friendly, but only the football coach means it.
Right.
Right? I don't come to, if you look at other sports, and let's pick on, basketball or baseball, right? They also have an off-season club team. I don't have an off-season club team when I was coaching high school. I'm not going to take you out of baseball practice and tell you we got a football game this weekend, right? That doesn't happen. Right. And I think that's probably the third part is that there are whatever you're going to learn and then the physical training that you go through in football, it not only suits you in life, but in any other sport. You can't beat it. It equates. Right. How many times do you see things like, oh, well, he's a tough player in another sport, or he's physical, in the paint in basketball. Well, he was a football player growing up. So that kind of thing, or, whatever the case may be. So, why should the kid play was the other question. Again, I'll take the camaraderie answer. I think that's the first one, but I think it's also understanding parents' concerns. And that goes back to the safety question of hey, nowadays, it's not like we just take a bunch of kids and tell them to run their heads into each other, right? Like there's a lot more coaching and technique and safety that's involved in it. And that goes back to get to know your coach, find the right team that's for you. Are they implementing tip of the spear? Are they doing the things like we have a good relationship with USA Football, which is a great start for every parent and every coach. Start there. Like, what does the modern youth and high school football game look like? Right? It's not what you're going to see on Saturdays and Sundays, right? There's a development track that goes along with that. So I think for the parents, it's like, don't just take my word for it. Find out what your local organization is doing. I can tell you what we're throwing all these tools like at our coaches, right? So again, back to our resources page of our website. Again, anyone can steal it. You want the connection to the sales rep at Huddle for game film, or you want, it's all there. Here's your concussion certificate. Everyone's got to get that. It's free. It's from NFHS. Here's the link. USA Football. That's free. Things like that. So go do that stuff. And I think that would probably, because any parent, right? It's usually the parents their questions about the health and safety of their child, and letting them know that we absolutely have that in mind. So rather the culture's changed from, oh, well, it's just part of a game to no, we're actually doing something about it, and here it is. And don't just take my word for it. These are what's been implemented.
Right. Diron, with that, share the website. You've alluded to it a few times, and so share that website for people that are in Arizona that are looking for that, or if anybody just wants some information. Yeah,
Arizona YFL for Youth Football League, ArizonaYFL.com. I think AZYFL gets you there too, but either the abbreviation of the word Arizona YFL. I think our Instagram's got like over 4,000 people on it. There's videos of our players that we're super proud of, and all of that's on there as well. All of our teams. We're lucky that we've got, like I said, we have a lot of talented kids. We have a lot of talented coaches and people that care a lot. So there's a lot of good stuff going on in Arizona. So those are two great places to check us out.
Fantastic, John. Any flags on fourth down?
No, it'd be disrespect to stop it any other place than where we are right now.
Diron, awesome sharing today. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend time with us and share a little bit about what's going on with Arizona youth football.
Good, thank you guys. I appreciate the 4 downs too. Even though I know we had some reviews and challenges and that, but the format does keep us there because you can tell, like, wind me up and watch me go on this stuff. We really care out a lot about youth football and football in general, and so like we could, anything you need anytime, let me know.
Dude,
we appreciate you doing a great job with all 7 downs of our 4 downs.
Diron, you got the most downs for sure out of any guest we've had so far. You got the most downs. One of the things I want to kind of plug into as we go forward here. You talked about the brotherhood, the camaraderie. John, I was coming. I had dinner earlier today with our chief counsel, Paul Ramsher. Paul's a Hall of Fame football player at Howard University, and we're going to have him on, share a little bit of his story in a coming episode sometime soon. So with that, I'm going to put a bow around this. John, Diron, thank you so much for our time here tonight. Another unscripted huddle brought to you by the National Football Alliance, where we are honoring, improving, and advancing the great sport with partners and great individuals leading local youth football like Diron here today in Arizona. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you again in our next episode.
Well, that's it for this week. Let's keep the conversation going to help NFA honor, advance, and improve the game of football. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another set of downs on the Unscripted Huddle.